Introduction to the Lone Brave Warrior of Dopa. www.zhaoshuyuan.com. This book is also known as Man in Dopa. I am Senior Brother Xiao Yan, and is a Dopa fan book written by readers. As is well known, Emperor Yan was very strong. And I am his second senior brother. This book is the main stage for original works, comic fans, and anime fans to comment on. It focuses on emotions and companionship. Feel free to leave comments. Life is long, we go far to the mountains and seas. https://www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Chapter 1. Black Shirt Young Man, 1. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Duki Continent, Gamma Empire, Eastern Warcraft Mountains. The moonlight is like water, the mountains and forests are like snow, the stars are as beautiful as dreams, and the night is also quietly sleeping. However, the massive Warcraft is hidden in darkness, with bloody scenes happening quietly every second. Between the mountains and forests, there was a cluster of flames dancing. A warm fire dispels the terrifying darkness around. Beside the fire, a young man in white was unconscious, his delicate face illuminated by the flames. I always feel strange. The voice of an old man echoed beside the fire, and a phantom soul floated unsteadily, uttering a sentence that touched its head but not its head. He stared at the unconscious young man in white, his eyes flickering with a dense white flame, as if he could discern all the illusions in the world. The night was cold, and the cold wind made the boy tremble, his eyelids twitched, and he showed signs of awakening. The old and illusory figure was momentarily stunned, then gently reached out his hand, and the terrifying soul instantly shrouded in pressure, suppressing everything around him. He stared at the young man in white with a serious and bright gaze, slowly opening his eyes. There was also a flickering forest white flame on his index finger. The flame appeared weak and delicate, but it twisted the surrounding space by burning and squeezing it, causing a genuine sense of fear. The young man in white woke up and saw a fire when he opened his eyes. He blinked his eyes and also saw the old man behind the fire. More precisely, it is the soul of the elderly. What is your surname and who is it? Yao Lao spoke in a low tone. The young man in white frowned, his mind in chaos, and he stared blankly at the soul in front of him, with a restless expression. Yao Lao's expression relaxed, and the flames on his fingers extinguished. However, he did not remove the pressure around him. Instead, he floated up to the young man in white and said, "Your name is Chongxian. I brought you out of an ancient ruins 100 years ago. You can call me Yao Lao, or call me Teacher. Yao Lao. Teacher." The young man in white opened his mouth, his expression dull, and his tone very stiff. Yao Lao nodded contentedly, his hands behind his back, and turned to look at the dense forest behind him. The young man in white was like a puppet. Following the gaze of the old doctor, he saw a black figure jumping in the forest. Like a fierce tiger, like a spirit monkey, carrying a gust of strong wind and launching fierce attacks one after another. I saw him jump flexibly and open his palm to grab the empty space on the ground, and stones were sucked up and flew. Then, with a reverse thrust, a terrifying thrust was generated, with two completely opposite forces sandwiched left and right, and the hard stones were shattered in mid-air. The scattered gravel caused smoke and dust to roll around, and the residual power on the gravel splattered onto the thick trees, leaving scratches like knives and axes. The black shadow rushed out of the smoke, revealing a handsome face. He let out a shout and punched a sturdy tree. With a loud bang, the big tree swayed and let out a mournful cry. Bang! In less than 3 seconds, another dull explosion sound came from inside the trunk, and the big tree creaked and fell to the ground with a loud bang. The young man in white blinked his eyes and looked surprised. Yao Lao nodded lightly, showing a look of comfort and love towards the little guy in the distance. Immediately after, his face became serious, and he stepped out in front of the young man in white. He reached out his index finger and placed it on the young man's spiritual cover. The powerful and domineering soul power instantly poured back into the young man's body. Extremely tough, not asking if the young man is willing or not. The boy's face turned painful and he let out a low growl. Yao Lao flicked his finger again, and in an instant, the young man was completely enveloped in a forest white flame, which burned fiercely. Teacher, I have comprehended the dark power, and the combat power has more than doubled. The black-clad boy returned from a distance, his face full of fatigue, but particularly excited. Yao Lao nodded in response, fully focused on the white-clad boy who had been refined by the flames, with a solemn expression on his old face. The young man in white let out a painful roar, flapping the flames on his body, but with no effect. The young man in black couldn't bear to speak. Teacher, are you trying to kill someone? No, this is honing his body. Yao Lao continued to stimulate his soul power, and the flames on the white-clothed boy's body became more and more intense. Little guy, do you want a good senior brother who hurts you and loves you? Yao Lao chuckled with a hint of mockery in his tone. Teacher, you want to take him as an apprentice? The black-clothed boy's eyes lit up, not knowing how the white-clothed boy in front of him could have made the teacher have the idea of taking him as an apprentice. Yao Lao chuckled, his face showing a hint of fatigue, indicating that the refining process was not an easy task. The young man in white struggled in the flames, unable to move under the terrifying soul pressure of the medicine elder. Finally, he slowly quieted down, as if dead. Little one, I'll lend you a drop of blood essence. Yao Lao took advantage of the moment when the young man in white had calmed down, and his finger slashed like a knife in the void. A blood cut appeared on the back of the black shirt boy's hand, from which a drop of blood peeled off. Unlike ordinary blood, that drop of fresh blood is particularly rich in the power of life. The black-clad boy lost his essence, his face turned much whiter, and his chest was heavy. Yao Lao flicked his finger, and a strand of misty white flames merged into his blood essence. He flicked his finger again and his blood essence flew into the white-clothed boy's spiritual cover. Dong! As if a drop of water had merged into a pond, creating ripples. On the forehead of the young man in white, a red flame cloud mark slowly appeared. In the middle of the fire cloud imprint, there is a wisp of forest white flames dancing slightly, like agile butterflies dancing gracefully. After finishing these tasks, the soul power that Yao Lao suppressed on the young man in white faded like a tide, and he became even more tired. His originally illusory figure became more transparent. Yao Lao gave a bitter smile and said, "It's even more tiring than refining high-level pills. Oh, it seems like he's really getting old." The young man in the black shirt spoke with heartache. "Teacher, are you okay?" "It's okay," Yao Lao chuckled and gazed at the young man in white who had been tempered by the forest white flame, as if admiring a magnificent artwork. "His name is Chongxian, and he will be your senior brother from now on. I have left your soul imprint in his sea of consciousness. Your hearts are connected and your souls are connected. He will supervise your practice in the future." Yao Lao squinted his eyes with a hint of cunning. The young man in black froze for a moment and said, "So? What are you doing in the future, teacher?" "Of course it's sleeping big. Take a good rest, after all, I am a very weak soul body," said the old medicine man slowly. "I clearly want to become a hands-off shopkeeper." The young man in black shirt sighed in his heart and secretly roasted. "Teacher, where does senior brother come from?" He had just left, and in the blink of an eye, he had an extra cheap senior brother. The young man in black couldn't react now. "That happened 100 years ago, and I will talk to you about the causes and consequences slowly in the future. When I discovered him, he was in a long and deep sleep. His physical strength is terrifying, but his soul is trapped in nothingness. Even in my heyday, the power of his soul cannot awaken him. A few days ago, I unexpectedly discovered that while refining medicine, you used your soul power to resonate with him. Because of your presence, he began to wake up. The young man in black shirt's heart trembled as he watched Chong Xian, who remained motionless after the refining was completed. The Duki continent is vast and boundless, with countless strange things that I cannot explain clearly. His potential is extremely amazing, even terrifying. As you can see, even my strange fire cannot refine his body. Yao Lao said seriously. The young man in black became a little nervous upon hearing this. If one day his senior brother loses control and kills someone, who can stop him? Yao Lao smiled and comforted, relax, he has already imprinted your soul mark and will not harm you. If there is any change in the situation, I can guarantee that he won't touch my disciple at all. Yao Lao had a clear mind and dispelled the doubts of the black-clad boy. Under the curious gaze of the elderly and the young, Chong Xian, dressed in white, moved his eyelids and slowly woke up. The night breeze is slightly cool, with 3 pairs of big and small eyes staring at each other. The old medicine is illusory, with a deep and mysterious breath. It exudes a fairy-like aura, like a celestial being from beyond. This is Chong Xian's first impression. Secondly, the despairing and suffocating terrifying force still trembles in my heart when I recall it. Chong Xian's eyes moved and he looked at the young man in the black shirt next to Yao Lao, who happened to eye him. Youth is green and shy. Behind shyness, there is a mature and steady temperament that surpasses age. Zhaoshuyuan.com. He scratched his head and smiled with sincerity. Hello senior brother, my name is Xiao Yan. Hello. Chong Xian was stunned for a long time, feeling like everything was like a dream. Your senior brothers, get close and personal, so I won't get involved as an old man. Yao Lao gave Chong Xian a meaningful glance, and his illusory figure turned into a burst of green smoke, penetrating into Xiao Yan's black ring. Senior brother Chong Xian, please take good care of me in the future. Xiao Yan clasped his fists and saluted, smiling as he spoke. Junior brother, you are humble. Chong Xian gave a bitter smile and politely returned the courtesy. The young man in black has a graceful demeanor. He has a resolute personality and a handsome appearance. Chong Xian had this impression when he first saw Xiao Yan, and he blurted out words of praise. Senior brother praised me falsely, Xiao Yan said shyly. They are all sincere words, Chong Xian said. Your senior brother's words are polite, don't take them seriously. Yao Lao suddenly poured cold water on his head. Xiao Yan's mouth twitched and he was speechless. The teacher is good everywhere, but unfortunately he has a long mouth. Chong Xian laughed heartily. At midnight, the mountains became even quieter. Xiao Yanpan sat on the ground, his eyebrows and eyes drooping, and his breathing was extremely regular, breathing and practicing. Circles of pale yellow fighting spirit surrounded his body, constantly swallowing and absorbing. His strength is slowly and steadily increasing. Chong Xian withdrew his gaze and added a lot of firewood to the fire. Looking at the blazing fire, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. Sometimes I look up and sigh lightly, sometimes I look down and contemplate, and sometimes I simply daydream. Finally, the eyes turned red, and thousands of thoughts converged into a murmur. Sleeping trough, I have actually traveled through. Chapter 2. Black Shirt Young Man, 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The morning light is like gold, and the Warcraft Mountains are shrouded in clouds and mist, like a fairyland. Between the open forests, the cheerful voice of the youth resounded. Blowing fire palm. Xiao Yan maintained an attacking posture, unleashing a wave of fighting spirit in his hand. Chong Xian, dressed in white clothes, swayed and swayed, with his body straight and motionless. Xuanjie's fighting skills surprisingly did not shake Chong Xian at all. Xiao Yan grabbed it again, his palms filled with fighting energy, and he spoke softly, suck in your palms. Chong Xian was not pulled, Xiao Yan was pulled off the ground by suction, his elbow bent, and a terrifying force burst out, 8 pulls, collapse. Bang! Xiao Yan hit Chongshuan's chest with his backhand, causing ripples of fighting spirit to spread and a turbulent current to rush around, swaying the plants and trees for a moment. Chong Xian was knocked out and hit on a sturdy century-old tree. The old tree sobbed loudly, with spider web-like cracks cracking on its trunk. Xiao Yan's condition was even worse, and the anti-seismic force lifted him out, spewing out a mouthful of blood. Yao Lao's illusory figure suddenly appeared and lifted him up in mid-air like a chick. I reminded you before not to exert all your strength in the 8 extremities collapse, otherwise your little arms and legs will eventually break, Yao Lao sternly scolded. After speaking, he sighed lightly and placed him on the ground, taking out 3 revitalization pills. Xiao Yan awkwardly smiled and swallowed the qi-returning pill directly into his stomach. He looked anxiously at Chong Xian, whose whole body was embedded in a big tree and his feet were off the ground. Don't worry, he's very resistant to making. Yao Lao chuckled. That's something brought out from ancient ruins, ordinary things can't hurt a single bit. Sure enough, just as Yao Lao's words fell, Chong Xian slapped the big tree with his back hand and broke free, surprisingly unscathed. Even the white clothes on his body were not damaged at all. Junior brother's fighting skills are terrifying, I guess they are comparable to the 6-star Do. Chong Xian smiled and spoke up. Xiao Yan crossed his face and realized that the 8 extremities collapse had failed for the first time, causing him to feel depressed. Yao Lao looked at his dejected expression and didn't speak up well. If you encounter setbacks, you will lose your head. How do you face the 3-year agreement? How to make that person stand out and prove that they are not weaker than anyone else? Junior brother, you are already excellent, Chong Xian approached and comforted. I just feel. Xiao Yan looked dejected, and his words made the corners of Yao Lao's mouth twitch. Teacher, no matter how strong the 8 extremes collapse is, it's just a mysterious level combat skill. When will you give me your promised ground level combat skill? I promised to punch my senior brother into the tree with just 1 punch, I can't even pick him out. Xiao Yan chuckled and blinked at Chong Xian. Chong Xian smiled knowingly and then spoke up, yes, teacher. You can't have the same level of ground level combat skills, otherwise you wouldn't be embarrassed to report your old man's name. Yao Lao is both angry and funny. These 2 disciples vent their anger through one nostril, and they are professional masters. Chong Xian had only woken up for a day and was completely distorted by Xiao Yan. Art is not in many, it is in essence. Yao Lao said in a deep voice to Xiao Yan, why didn't you use the dark power of the 8 extremes collapse just now? What if I break my senior brother? Xiao Yan said. I said it won't break, rest assured to make it. Take an hour to recover your fighting spirit and continue practicing. Yao Lao didn't give him a chance to argue, he turned into a wisp of green smoke and returned to the black ring. Xiao Yan touched his nose and gave a bitter smile to Chong Xian. Then he sat down, closed his eyes and meditated, refining the power of the qi-returning pill in his body. Buzz. Centered around him, the pale yellow fighting spirit surged and shone like stars. Duki enters the body with breathing, constantly enriching the doji cyclone at the Dantian position. Xiao Yan's fighting spirit was recovering at an astonishing speed. Chong Xian sat quietly beside him, with envy in his eyes. Practicing the qi fighting technique is really a cool thing. Chong Xian's eyes drooped and he secretly analyzed the subtle current situation. One is to become a disciple of the medicine master and become Xiao Yan's senior brother. The second is to become a professional human flesh sandbag, helping Xiao Yan hone his own strength. Thirdly, due to their unique circumstances, their physical strength is incredibly strong and firm like a rock. These things are the capital that supports his survival in the Duki continent. 1 hour later, a new round of pair training begins. Xiao Yan changed his tired appearance, his face was radiant, and he was full of energy. Between the eyebrows, confident and composed. The youth is not poor, and the future Emperor Yan is indeed handsome and valiant. Senior brother, be careful. Xiao Yan chuckled lightly, his pale yellow fighting spirit surging on him, and he raised his hand to send it out. 5 fingers form claws, and a powerful suction suddenly appears. Suck in your palm. Good day. Chong Xian grinned with confidence in his golden iron-like body. Bang! With 1 foot crushing the ground, Chong Xian's body was straight, and his waist sank like a tranquil needle, not moving at all. Xiao Yan's fist, wrapped in a pale yellow fighting spirit and full of power, flashed close to Chong Xian's chest. The sound of a broken drink rang out, the 8 extremities collapse. Speaking late, then fast, the fist fiercely hit Chongshuan's chest, making a muffled sound. This time's punching power is 3 points weaker than last time. The 3-part strength road has transformed into dark strength. Bang! Chongxian was shaken by the dark force and flew far away, leaving a long mark on the ground. Blowing fire palm. Xiao Yan took advantage of the victory and pursued, with a strong thrust in his palm. Chongxian took a hard move and was then blasted far away. Well done. Chongxian was surprised in his heart. Xiao Yan was indeed a demon, and he mastered Xuanjia's combat skills with ease. He had a very reasonable grasp of the battle rhythm and was truly a fighting genius. Yao Lao's illusory figure also appeared, praising Xiao Yan's performance twice. Chong Xian walked over to the two with a smile, showing no concern for acting as a tool. Teacher, I have reached a new level of understanding of the Xuanjia fighting technique. The black-clad boy smiled confidently. Very good, crushing the 6 stars is not a problem, Yao Lao nodded with a smile. Although he has traveled across the mainland for many years and read countless people, it is undeniable that Xiao Yan is excellent. So, can I learn the Dijie Do technique now? Xiao Yan blinked at Chong Xian, then rubbed his hands at the old medicine man and chuckled. Chong Xian nodded in agreement and said, Teacher, junior brother really needs the earth-level fighting technique to be close to him. This can be considered an additional talisman. Moreover, my junior brother's cultivation of burning technique is currently at a low level and cannot be sustained for a long time. Without strong combat skills to rely on, it would be very dangerous to find him at the book garden www.zhaosuiyuan.com. Xiao Yan twitched the corner of his mouth and gave Chong Xian a white glance. Yao Chen snorted and said, 2 malicious guys, I see you guys wish you could eat my coffin book. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan chuckled bitterly. Anyway, in a few days, I'll teach you each a set of fighting skills. Chong Xian, you have cultivated your fighting skills, so you can love and cherish your junior brother. Yao Lao chuckled and had an old mischievous face. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan exchanged a glance, both shaking their heads and smiling bitterly. At this moment, Xiao Yan's bitter smile turned into confusion. Senior brother, how did you know that I practiced the burning technique? Chong Xian was taken aback and somewhat caught off guard. Yeah, they just realized it for less than a day. Yao Lao smiled and said, don't forget what I said to you last night. Chong Xian has left behind your pure essence and soul power. Your hearts are connected and your souls are connected. He naturally knows many things. Chong Xian felt a bit embarrassed and said, I didn't mean to pry into privacy, junior brother. Don't blame me. It's okay, Xiao Yan waved his hand and smiled with relief. Then he suddenly froze, as if he had thought of something very terrifying, and his face became frightened. Senior brother, can you perceive everything about me? Chong Xian nodded and smiled helplessly. I sneaked into Sun Er's room in the middle of the night, touched Xiao Yu's thigh, and I was supposed to continue talking, but when I saw Xiao Yan's face devoid of blood and full of shame, Chong Xian smiled kindly and said, Junior brother, don't worry, I promise not to go out and talk nonsense, after all, we share weal and woe. Okay. Xiao Yan's mouth trembled as he suddenly had the thought of committing suicide with shame. Chapter 3 Black Shirt Young Man, 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Warcraft mountain range once again welcomes dawn, with two young men, one black and one white, embarking on a journey full of energy. The two of them shuttle between the dangerous mountains and forests, and the low roar of wild beasts can be heard in the distance. Tall trees cover the sky, the sparse shadows in the forest slant horizontally, and the silence is deep. Xiao Yan walked ahead, still recalling Nalan Yenron's withdrawal. Xiao Zhan had a shy and angry expression on his face, as well as the faint joy on the faces of those who watched the excitement. Suddenly, he was filled with righteous indignation and was about to vent his anger. Chong Xian was also contemplating many things in his heart. According to the life trajectory of Emperor Yan, the experience of the Warcraft Mountains was the beginning of his transformation, and it was also a true novice village for a generation of unparalleled Tianjiao. Chong Xian felt a surge of excitement in his heart. He was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to travel with the future Emperor Yan. To witness together the mountains we have walked, the water we have crossed, the wind we have blown, and the rain we have rained on. The two of them walked slowly, but in just half a day, they walked out of the forest and arrived at a bustling ancient town. Qingshan Town, the place where dreams begin. Qingshan Town is adjacent to the entrance of the Warcraft mountain range, with a considerable flow of people and a constant stream of vendors and merchants. Various sounds of selling are deafening. On both sides of the Bluestone Road, there are a dazzling array of shops, offering a dazzling array of goods. In the middle of the road, there were mercenaries with big arms and round waists coming and going, their voices bold and their eyes cold. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan separated and headed in opposite directions. Chong Xian took the gold coins and searched for an inn with a decent environment. Xiao Yan was running around, searching for various materials needed to refine medicine. He inquired about the news all the way and finally entered a pharmacy called Wanyao Zhai. On the other side, after settling down, Chong Xian sat on the bed with lowered eyebrows and eyes, carefully recalling the detailed life trajectory of Emperor Yan. Unconsciously, an hour has passed. Chong Xian thought of many things in his mind, got up and stretched out to get some air. When he first arrived at Duki Continent, he was full of curiosity about everything. The teacher wants to teach martial arts, and the bottom line is the Xuanjia. Chong Xian walked out of the inn, feeling very excited in his heart. He wants to turn his energy into his wings, he wants to walk in the air. He wants to take risks, he wants to break through a wonderful world. Chong Xian's eyes drooped, supporting the railing, and he could see the bustling crowds on the nearby street, exuding a sense of market. At a certain moment, the crowd suddenly gathered and seemed to see something extraordinary. Chong Xian became interested and looked in the direction of the crowd, his gaze fixed on a woman in a white dress. She is like a bright moon in the sky, surrounded by stars, and has become the focus of everyone. Her appearance is not particularly beautiful, but more like the girl next door, with a warm and lovely touch. A frown and a cluster make people feel comfortable. Chong Xian withdrew his gaze and his eyes lit up with excitement. The destiny gear of Emperor Yan began to quietly rotate. Not long after, Xiao Yan returned to the inn and brought a bunch of potatoes. Watching Xiao Yanqing rush and throw those potatoes into the ring, he tightly closes the door, locks the doors and windows, rubs his hands and chuckles, "Senior brother, I've got something good. Valuable natural resources and treasures." He is full of excitement. At this moment, the phantom figure of Yao Lao appeared and a sentence poured a chill on his heart. "You ignorant kid, just a piece of blood lotus essence has made you proud and forget yourself." Xiao Yan felt exhausted and suddenly became too lazy to speak. Chong Xian chuckled and comforted him with a few words. "Junior brother, did you just notice that there is a beautiful woman in a white dress in the town?" Chong Xian spoke with deep meaning. "Oh." Xiao Yan shrugged, "Her name is Xiao Yixin. She is known for her beauty and kindness in Qingshan Town, and has received support from many people." "I see." Chong Xian looked very clear. "Tomorrow, enter the Warcraft Mountains and team up with her. We are alone and crossing the Warcraft Mountains is unsafe. Team up with her. Xiao Yan hesitated for a moment and said, the mercenaries who are qualified to team up with her are all experienced veterans of the 100 battles. We may not have a chance. And it's not certain if she will team up to explore the Warcraft Mountains tomorrow. Chong Xian blinked his eyes and almost blurted out. Little Dr. Immortal will definitely explore the Warcraft Mountains tomorrow. The words reached my lips and I stubbornly held them back. At this moment, Xiao Yan did not take this matter to heart and couldn't put it down. He played with the Blood Lotus spirit and reluctantly took it back into his ring. Cough, there's no hope. The teasing voice of Yao Lao came from inside the black ring. Xiao Yan curled his lips, his face not red and his heart not beating. There was nothing to say overnight. The next morning, the noise outside the inn disturbed Chong Xian, who was meditating and practicing. Chong Xian went out and leaned against the railing of the inn, only to find a large gathering of people in the distance. In the midst of the crowd, there was a friendly and charming little medical fairy. She is like a small white flower, eye-catching, delicate and bright. The fierce mercenaries on the periphery shouted loudly, their voices echoing one after another, all wanting to become flower protectors. Escorting the little Dr. Immortal into the Warcraft Mountains to collect herbs is an immensely honorable thing, and many people have scorching eyes, claiming that they do not need any remuneration and are willing to escort them. Junior brother, the little Dr. Immortal is going into the mountain. Let's join in the fun together. Chong Xian laughed heartily. Xiao Yan, with his strength stabilizing the 6-star dough, unexpectedly became a member of the little Dr. Immortal Flower Protector. Chong Xian relied on his incredibly strong physical strength to stand still, causing a 3-star fighter's scar-faced mercenary to strike 3 solid punches. Ah! The mercenary knelt on the ground, making screams of agony like a dead mother. Everyone took a deep breath and looked at the 2 young men, one black and one white, without daring to show any contempt. The boy in white looks only 20 years old, half a head taller than the boy in black, and at a young age, he possesses terrifying physical strength. The young man in the black shirt was even younger and more demonic. With one punch, he exploded a big tree, causing everyone to sigh. The beautiful woman in a white dress in the middle of the crowd couldn't help but glance sideways, secretly sighing in her heart. Where did the monster come from? There were only 2 up there, who could bear it. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan were particularly low-key and integrated into the crowd after receiving corresponding commissions. Not showing off, still friendly when talking to others. The other mercenaries immediately showed increasing respect to the 2 young men, one black and one white. More than 30 people on this trip are marching towards the Warcraft Mountains behind them in a grand and majestic manner. Among the mercenary group, there is a small group that stands out particularly. They have fierce eyes, the same attire, and are all wearing one-eyed wolf badges on their chests. Other mercenaries dare not approach or actively talk to them. Is it the wolf-head mercenary group? Chong Xian smiled in his heart and found the tall muley in the crowd. His handsome face was full of confidence, and a pair of malicious eyes accidentally fell on the little Dr. Fairy. His eyes were bright and aggressive, as if he wanted to burn through the white skirt of the little medical fairy and glimpse the scenery beneath it. This muley is an important role. Chong Xian smiled in his heart. Retract your gaze and look at Xiao Yan. I saw Xiao Yan staring at Muli, with not much good temper on his face. It was obvious that Muli had scrutinized the face of the little doctor without restraint, and Xiao Yan had already seen it clearly. Cough, pay attention to the surroundings and be safe. Muli noticed Xiao Yan's scrutinizing gaze and immediately withdrew his gaze, loudly commanding his subordinates. At the same time, a confidant shouted over and whispered, "Help me test the foundation of those 2 people. I feel like they joined the mercenary group not just for commission." "I understand." The person nodded and bowed, and immediately went to get things done. Muley narrowed his eyes and showed a gentle smile, turning his head to chat with the little white flower-like medical fairy. Xiao Yixian wore a smile, mostly just listening. She didn't want to talk to the person in front of her, but the other person came up with a thick face like a dog's skin ointment. She felt embarrassed to ruin the relationship, so she kept a smiling face. But her remaining light fell on the two young men, one black and one white, who were rushing on the road with a heavy head. These two people stand out from the crowd, their temperament alone sets them apart. The key is that they are both more handsome than Muley and look very pleasing to the eye. Muley kept looking for topics, and his identity as the young leader of the Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps made him confident and fearless, with a particularly loud voice. He thought he had already moved the little medical fairy with his personal charm, otherwise why did the fairy greet him with a smile all the way? Until he smiled and glanced casually, realizing that the fairy's afterglow had always fallen on others. Muley's smiling face stiffened as he clenched his fist hidden inside his robe, feeling a sense of shame and anger. Make some trouble for those two people, Muley deliberately distanced himself from the little medical fairy and whispered to the people around him. Young master, rest assured. A sleazy-looking mercenary chuckled with pride. He quietly took out a medicine bottle from his arms and approached Chong Xian and Xiao Yan without leaving a trace. All of this was seen by the little Doctor Immortal, who was startled in her heart. She guessed what was inside the small bottle, and her red lips lifted slightly, wanting to speak. But he saw two young men, one black and one white, not looking back, while also showing a hint of playful laughter. Muley suppressed his smile, hoping that his subordinates would sprinkle the special bone powder that attracted Warcraft on the two of them, and then sit and wait for the good play to begin. What are you looking at? What's wrong with you? The boy in black and the boy in white suddenly had a quarrel and started a big argument. Xiao Yan looked angry and raised his hand to strike Chong Xian. Chong Xian flashed and quickly avoided. Xiao Yan's palm was enveloped in fighting spirit, and his riveting force was about to pull towards Chongshuan's face, secretly adding a layer of 8 extremities collapse dark force. With a roar of slaps, Chong Xian dodged and revealed the sneaky and sleazy mercenary. Ah! He was stunned and saw a dark palm covering his face. Pop bang! The person was whipped out with blood at the corner of their mouth. Flying into mid-air, the dark energy exploded and shattered a white tooth. That person flew into the forest, unaware of life or death. Muley saw his subordinates being lightly portrayed and whipped away with his own eyes, his expression extremely ugly, and his gaze at Xiao Yan was full of fear. In that slap, there was actually hidden energy. A loud slap left the mercenary half dead, and even discerning people could guess the cause and effect. This slap hit Muley's face, leaving a deep red mark. Muley bit his teeth and pretended to be surprised. What's the situation? His subordinates issued a reprimand, and the sound of clanging swords kept coming and going, surrounding two young men, one black and one white, with an unpleasant expression. Dare to touch the brother of our wolf-headed mercenary group, get him. A big man with a fierce expression, like a crazy lion, pointed a big knife at Xiao Yan's chest. He likes to slap his face, let's take turns slapping him. If you chop off his head again, I really think knocking down a tree is amazing. Bah, it's just a little chicken. The Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps was ferocious, and the walking team was forced to stop. Other mercenaries looked at the besieged two young men with sympathy in their eyes. The Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps has always been arrogant and tough, known for being ruthless, and they dare not provoke them. Are you tough with your fists? Can you resist my butcher's knife? The ferocious man at the head laughed recklessly and grabbed Xiao Yan's collar, pushing and shoving. Chong Xian was also threatened by two people holding large knives beside him. Young Master Muley, we are a team, there's no need to make things like this, right? The little Dr. Xiandai frowned. They were also unintentional. Please understand, young Master Muley. Yes, Master Muley has a large quantity. Let them go. At this moment, the mercenaries around spoke up one after another, supporting the little medical fairy. It is evident that the appeal of the little Doctor Immortal is strong. Muley sneered, a group of mercenaries mixed with fish, and he didn't even notice it. However, the necessary elegance cannot be lost. He chuckled helplessly and said, I hate violence, but if my subordinates don't listen, I can't do anything about it. He must die. Take off his arm. Just kill him and throw him in the forest, and the Warcraft will come and devour his bones and blood. The wolf-headed mercenary group was in a frenzy, playfully scrutinizing the thin and weak black-clad boy. The young man in the black shirt remained silent, his brows and eyes drooping, as if he had been frightened and foolish. Ha ha ha. The ferocious man laughed loudly, while the other members of the wolf-headed mercenary group mocked him. Muley squinted his eyes and chuckled lightly. The little doctor nervously stomped his feet and spoke anxiously, Young Master Muley, there's no need to do this. Muley likes to see the anxious and flustered appearance of the little Doctor Fairy, and the eyes that fall on her become even more brazen. Well, as long as they kneel down. Muley chuckled and spoke halfway. Foolish. Xiao Yan spoke softly. For a moment, Muley's voice paused. The ultimate among fools. Chong Xian continued to repair his sword, and his body suddenly collided with the two wielding knives in front of him. Without any skill, a bison charges forward sideways. Seeking death. The two of them quickly reacted and swung their knives to chop. Xiao Yan was also unwilling to be outdone and punched the face of the ferocious man. Dang! The big man's horizontal sword blocked the way, and he smiled proudly. The next moment, Xiao Yan gave a strange smile and said, Explosion. What? The big man was startled, and suddenly a terrifying dark energy came from the blade of the big knife. His hand was shaken and his tiger's mouth was shattered, revealing white bones. Suck in your palm. Xiao Yan sucked at the big man's face, and the big man let out a scream as his body was pulled close to Xiao Yan. 8. Extreme collapse. The big man didn't have time to react, but Xiao Yan's fist hit him in the chest. It's like scratching an itch, looking for the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com, which is soft and fluffy. He was pleasantly surprised and wanted to laugh, and the next moment he felt a terrifying force raging in his chest. Bang! Ah! He let out a scream and a blood hole exploded in his chest, leaving his entire body blurry and flying backwards for a long distance. On Chong Xian's side, the barbaric body shattered the sharp weapons of the mercenaries and knocked them into a tree, causing the tree to sway and leaves to scatter. The tree was filled with dense cracks, and the two of them were deeply embedded inside the big tree. Their bodies twitched and then their vitality was cut off. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan stood together again and swept around the crowd. Keep going, tough-headed. See if my fist can shatter your heads. Xiao Yan blew a mouthful of blood from his fist, his expression indifferent, and his voice calm. Chong Xian didn't speak, his eyes were equally cold, and he didn't feel how shocking the world had been just now. The wolf-headed mercenary group, a group of wolf dogs, were silent. Fear made them slowly retreat, afraid to make any disharmonious sounds. Muley's face was gloomy, more surprised. The two young talents are demons, who have gently broken through the Do person in their youth. Their moves are of the Xian-level Do technique, with a deep foundation of fighting spirit. They are even more venomous than veteran soldiers licking blood with their swords, and their moves are fatal with just one blow. This kind of person is too dangerous to let them live on once given sunshine, rain, dew, and growth time. It will be the ultimate disaster for the entire wolf-head mercenary corps. To strangle the strong, one must be in swaddling clothes. Muley's eyes flashed with madness and cruelty, and he didn't even intend to let anyone present go. Yu Guang drifted past the shocked and helpless little medical fairy, and Muley's breathing was rapid, with evil thoughts rising from his head. Before destroying the little white flower, let me enjoy it thoroughly. Chapter 4. Black Shirt Young Man, 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xiao Yixian, you are such a delicate little beauty. Muley sighed inwardly and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. With a big wave of his hand, the mercenaries of the Wolf-Head Mercenary Regiment tightly surrounded Chong Xian and Xiao Yan, revealing their swords. For a moment, the situation became extremely tense. Muley, don't go too far. Xiao Yixian was protected by a group of supporters, and her pretty face was full of anger. Muley felt even more itchy when he saw her angry and charming appearance. Haha smiled and said with a fierce expression, no one can leave today. I want to keep the little doctor immortal for myself, and others will be killed without mercy. The wolf-headed mercenaries made a mocking sound and launched a massacre against the mercenaries who were protecting the little medical fairy. Xiao Yixian's face turned pale, and he didn't expect Muley to be so bloodthirsty. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan were not much better either. A dozen or so big men from the wolf-headed mercenary group were emitting a ripple of fighting spirit, attacking from all directions. Their strength is above that of a 3-star fighter, be careful, Chong Xian and Xiao Yan reminded each other back to back. Perfect for practicing. Xiao Yan smiled and launched a counterattack with one swift step. The 8 extremes collapse. I saw a pale yellow fighting spirit rising from his fist, and a solid thud hitting the chest of the mercenary holding a sword across from him. Puff, ah! The person screamed in agony as they flew backwards for a long distance. The battle on Chongshuan's side was also on the verge of breaking out. In the blink of a cold light, a cold and long sword was seen slashing at Chongshuan's shoulder. The person gave a proud smile. However, in the next moment, with a clang, the sharp knife instantly shattered. Chong Xian reached out his hand and squeezed his neck. No, don't kill. Click. The person's face was frightened, and Chong Xian crushed his throat and threw it to the ground. Suddenly, there was a gust of wind breaking from behind, and a heavy axe slashed from behind, accompanied by mercenaries brutally cutting off. Chong Xian crossed his arm with his backhand. Chong. The large and round mercenary's face was shocked, and the axe in his hand cracked open. However, the slender arm of the young man in white was not injured at all. Chong Xian lowered his waist, took a fierce step under his feet, and pressed his head against the abdomen of the Han dynasty. The big man felt pain and his body flew out. Bang bang bang. On the other side, Xiao Yan's body was as fast as a gust of wind, with a backhand suction and a forehand grasp, using terrifying suction and thrust with agility and ease. In just a few blink of an eye, the fighters of a large group of wolf-headed mercenaries were knocked down. 8. Extreme, collapse. As Xiao Yan stopped drinking, someone fell to the ground and couldn't get up after snorting. Be careful, junior brother. At this moment, Chong Xian hurriedly shouted from beside him. I saw Muley with a cunning angle and launched an attack just after Xiao Yan unleashed a powerful punch. Muley's palm was wrapped in a light green fighting spirit, and his eyes flashed with venom, imprinted on Xiao Yan's back. Xiao Yan was unable to dodge and was suddenly attacked and repelled, resulting in injuries. Chong Xian rushed over like a wild ox and flew Muley out. Muley was shocked by Chong Xian's terrifying physical strength and said with a gloomy expression, the one wearing the black shirt has already been injured by me. Kill him as soon as possible. Except for the little doctor immortal, no one else can be spared. Yes. The cruel and ruthless mercenaries fought like chicken blood and crazily besieged Xiao Yan. On the side of the little doctor immortal, the mercenaries also suffered heavy casualties, with people constantly falling to the ground and bloodstaining the earth. The mercenaries around her were just temporary formations, unable to compete with the well-trained and brutal group of wolf-headed mercenaries. Xiao Yixian's face was ugly, even though she was clever, she couldn't escape the current predicament. When she was extremely anxious, she found that a black and a white boy were entangled with more than 10 members of the wolf-headed mercenary group, fighting fiercely. The 2 teenagers had a good balance of movement and coordination, and surprisingly, they were able to stand firm, gradually showing a trend of turning things around. Bang! Chong Xian violently collided with a person, who screamed and flew out. Xiao Yan's figure was agile, sucking up countless pieces of gravel in his hand and suddenly pushing it out, leaving bloodstains on the mercenary's face. Mercenaries are incapable of roaring and cannot approach at all. A group of fools. Muley cursed loudly and took another action, this time targeting the small medical fairy in the crowd. The little doctor immortal is fragile and cannot be easily dealt with. Protect the fairy. Someone shouted loudly and stood in front of Muley. Seeking death. Muley gave a cruel smile, his pale green fighting spirit enveloping his whole body, and even his head was surrounded by green fighting spirit. He slapped it out. The person who protected the little doctor immortal was also slapped, but unfortunately, the strength of the only 2-star fighter was perfectly crushed by Muley. Muley's fighting spirit surged, and the person's arm burst open, turning into a mist of blood. Ah! The voice was mournful. Muley kicked the obstacle away, his face stained with blood, and reached out to grab onto the shoulder of the little medical immortal. The pure white dress left a dazzling blood hand print, and the little doctor looked at Muley with disgust. Hee, go back with me, young master. Muley grinned wildly, and the little doctor suddenly took action, sprinkling a ball of powder on his face. The powder is highly toxic, and the burning pain makes Muley's heart skip a beat. Bastard! Muley was furious and went to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, punching him with red eyes. The little doctor let out a scream of surprise. Xiao Yan rushed to the scene with a loud punch. The 8 extremes collapse. 2 fists clashing, both trembling and retreating far away. Muley blushed and wanted to charge. Explosive. Xiao Yan chuckled. In a moment of shock, Muley's hands exploded with blood mist, and his entire arm was covered in blood and flesh, causing him to scream in agony. Young master. The others exclaimed, protect Muley behind you, but dare not easily come up and besiege Chongxian and Xiao Yan. In a short period of time, their wolf-headed mercenary group suffered heavy losses. The fool also saw that the 2 teenagers were not easy to mess with. I'm going to kill you. Muley shouted wildly, clutching his arms and contorting his face. You're funny, right? Chongxian chuckled lightly and looked at Xiao Yan, intending to eradicate the root cause. At this moment, someone from the wolf-head mercenary corps burned a signal flare. The flames burst into the sky, the fireworks were brilliant, leaving behind huge red wolf heads in the sky. Even 100 miles away, one can see it clearly. Withdraw. Chongxian opened his mouth, and Xiao Yan nodded and could not help but roast, if you can't beat him, you will shake him, and his face will be gone. Ha! The 2 teenagers rushed into the mountains and quickly evacuated. Xiao Yixian gave Muley a disgusted look and chased after the 2 young men in the direction they had left. Don't leave. Muley roared angrily, feeling extremely angry and frustrated. He was forced into such a mess by 2 inexperienced youths. He stared at the holy little medical fairy like a lily, and he needed to vent his anger. He wants 10 times, no, 100 times. The little doctor sneered and said, you're not afraid of your whole face completely rotting. You can try catching me. Chapter 5. Black Shirt Young Man, 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You can try catching me, said the little doctor with a serious expression. Then, she was caught. Muley stood beside her, able to smell her elegant and fragrant scent, with a satisfied smile on his face. Muley, you released the little fairy. Some of the supporters of mercenaries spoke with trembling voices. Muley sneered and said, I want to have a simple conversation with Xiao Yixian about medicinal knowledge. After finishing, I will definitely send her back. You guys, who is against it? Muley swept over the crowd, squinting and smiling. His face was swollen and eroded by poison, looking extremely ferocious. You. The mercenaries still had to resist, and the wolf-headed mercenaries surrounding them drew their swords with a fierce and evil spirit. The little doctor let out a light sigh, feeling disheartened. On a thick and sturdy tree in the distance, Xiao Yan withdrew his gaze and spoke to Chong Xian, "Senior brother, should we kill back?" Chong Xian stood on another big tree and joked, "Do you want heroes to save the beauty? I can't stand Mu Li's domineering face, saving people is just a passing act," Xiao Yan said, pinching his nose. "They have already mobilized reinforcements, and we alone cannot save the little medical immortal." "Teacher!" Chong Xian and Xiao Yan shouted at the same time. Xiao Yan let out a trembling sound of his black ring in his hand, and the old medicine man couldn't get angry and spoke up, "You two brats, you really treat me like a thug." "Teacher, only you can turn the tide." Xiao Yan chuckled. Yao Lao snorted lightly and spoke slowly, "Don't be impatient, the little girl's rescuer is here." Chong Xian and Xiao Yan were taken aback for a moment, and indeed noticed a large group of people approaching from all directions, dressed in different costumes. "The rescuers of the Wolf-Head Mercenary Regiment have also arrived." Xiao Yan's soul power was astonishing, and he whispered, staring in one direction. Shortly after his voice fell, a neat and uniform wolf-headed mercenary group emerged from the mountains and forests, with a unique one-eyed wolf badge on his chest that looked neither good nor bad. Roughly speaking, there are at least 30 people, all of whom have strength above that of a 3-star fighter. "Master Muley, the little Doctor Immortal is the great benefactor of our mercenaries in Qingshan town. You'd better let her go. Release the little Doctor Immortal, otherwise we won't hunt Warcraft anymore," specifically targeting the members of your Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps. More and more scattered mercenaries are emerging, forming an airtight encirclement. These scattered soldiers and wanderers have all received the favor and treatment of the little Doctor Immortal in Qingshan town. If the benefactor is in trouble, they will go straight to work. The strength of scattered mercenaries varies greatly, and their individual strength is far inferior to that of wolf-headed mercenary groups. However, their numbers are astonishingly large. Muley stared at the mercenaries constantly surging around, his scalp tingling. If there are too many fleas, even a male lion will be bitten alive. Muley gritted his teeth tightly and finally uttered a few harsh words, leading his subordinates away in a very awkward manner. The little medical fairy bowed to express gratitude for the commission of delivering charcoal in the snow. They laughed foolishly and dispersed, shouting. The influence of the little Doctor Immortal in Qingshan town cannot be underestimated. These mercenaries are accustomed to licking blood with their swords, and generally do not get involved in such difficult and unpleasant things. Xiao Yan sighed. Chong Xian nodded. In the life trajectory of Emperor Yan, the significance of the little Doctor Immortal is profound, and she does hold a significant position in Qingshan town. Even the commander of the Wolf-Head Mercenary Corps, Mu Shi, is very wary of her. Mu Snake, the 2-star dosher, is expected to appear soon. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan, like nothing else, shamelessly returned to the midst of the mercenaries protecting the little Doctor Immortal. The little Doctor Immortal not only did not blame them for fleeing, but also accepted them with a smile like a flower. The mercenary team reorganized its troops and continued to advance. Xiao Yan and Chong Xian walked beside Xiao Yixin this time. We were originally in a cooperative relationship, so there was no need to lose my life. If it weren't for worrying that they would be killed by Muley after I left, I would have managed to escape, whispered Xiao Yixin and Xiao Yan. The two of them chuckled and felt a bit ashamed. Xiao Yixin was protected by a group of mercenaries and encountered several attacks from Warcraft along the way. Fortunately, they were all first Order Warcraft and were quickly annihilated by the Alliance. Everyone cautiously explored along the way and arrived at a forest with rich spiritual energy. Looking around, the grass and trees were lush, surrounded by spiritual energy, and being in it was refreshing. Chong Xian raised his head and saw that the forest was actually a huge basin, like a treasure trove, where the spiritual energy of heaven and earth could not be dispersed. Chong Xian immediately knew that they had arrived at the Medicine Valley, which was a holy land for picking herbs. The little Dr. Fairy's eyebrows and eyes lit up and asked everyone to stop and rest. She wanted to start picking herbs nearby. Everyone set up camp, moved the people on duty. The leader was a burly man who shouted loudly, and everyone began to settle down in an orderly manner. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan watched as the little Dr. Fairy jumped and ran to collect herbs, and the two brothers found a seat to sit down. This place has abundant spiritual energy and is a treasure trove of feng shui for cultivation, Chong Xian said after looking around. I want to practice, call me if you have something to do. Xiao Yan didn't want to waste this good opportunity and sat down to start practicing against time. He doesn't have much time left, with only half of the 3-year contract remaining. His whole life is tense, and he has become obsessed and accustomed to becoming stronger through cultivation. Chong Xian remained silent. He was a newcomer and did not have any fighting spirit techniques or knowledge of cultivation. I don't know when the Duki technique mentioned by the teacher will be taught to us, Chong Xian thought to himself. Suddenly, something flashed through his mind and Chong Xian poked Xiao Yan. Senior brother, what's wrong? Xiao Yan opened his pitch-black eyes. Let's keep up with the little Dr. Immortal, maybe we'll meet something good. Chong Xian pointed to the direction where the little Dr. Immortal was leaving, and there are plenty of spiritual medicines here. Let's wander around, and if we're lucky, we can find spiritual medicines that can improve our cultivation. Xiao Yan's eyes lit up, and the two of them hit it off and followed suit. The little Dr. Immortal left the team far away, seemingly very purposeful. Along the way, he collected many valuable herbs, and his pretty face carried the joy of a bountiful harvest. She also searched for many herbs in hidden places with ease, indicating that she was very familiar with the vicinity of the Medicine Valley. She collected herbs slowly and quickly reached the edge of a high cliff. The rock wall is very steep, and the depth below is not bottomed out. Looking down the rock wall, I felt dizzy. In this dangerous place, normal people would not casually venture into it, but the little medical fairy walked to the edge of the cliff, as if there was something deeply attracted to her below the cliff. She needs to plant herbs on the rock wall. If she falls, she will be in pieces, Xiao Yan, who walked behind, sighed with a smack of his tongue. Let's get closer and see what medicine she wants to take. Chong Xian squinted at the rock wall and urged Xiao Yan to continue approaching. Yao Lao remained silent throughout the entire process, as if he had fallen asleep. On the rock wall, the little Dr. Immortal's clothes moved slightly in the light wind, beautiful and moving, as if a stunning painting. She folded her hands behind her, silent as if hesitating for something. Quickly, she moved. Take out the rope used for picking herbs, fix one end on a sturdy tree, and then climb down. It's hard to imagine such a weak and cultured girl behaving in such a dangerous way. It's very dangerous below. Xiao Yan and the others appeared beside her, and Xiao Yan kindly reminded her to speak out. Ah, you guys. The little doctor was startled, and a look of panic flashed on his face. You are risking yourself, there shouldn't be any treasure under the rock wall, right? Chong Xian lowered his eyes and looked down at the bottom of the rock wall. There is indeed something good. Ah! Xiao Yan and Xiao Yixian both exclaimed in surprise. The former was surprised, while the latter felt uneasy. There is a cave below the rock wall, which is likely a blessed place for a certain senior. Those who see it will have a share. Chong Xian chuckled. Xiao Yan's eyes flickered, and he gently rubbed his hands, sighing in his heart that his luck was really good. This. The little Dr. Fairy's face looked a bit ugly, but she didn't expect to be discovered. She was very frustrated why she was careless and let someone grab her little tail. Chong Xian stared below, where there was a stone platform protruding from the rock wall, covered in vines and dry grass branches. It was faintly visible that there was an opening behind the vines, which could lead to people. It's difficult for girls to get down, why don't we lie down? Chong Xian lowered his head to observe the entrance of the cave, and heard Xiao Yan curse and shout. He turned his head and a ball of white powder sprinkled before his eyes, instantly casting a white veil over the world. In my impression, Xiao Yixian is the kind of well-behaved and sensible little girl. Chong Xian was speechless in capital letters. The powder used by Xiao Yixian can cause rapid blindness, deep coma, and even death. It's too poisonous. Fortunately, Chong Xian has a special physique and cannot even burn the strange fire of the old medicine. He is not afraid of small overpowering drugs at all. Xiao Yixian gave a cunning smile and was eventually pinched by Chong Xian's fair wrist. Chong Xian originally wanted to shout loudly. "Woman, you're playing with fans." Thinking it was out of place, I decided to hold it back. "You're such a cool little girl," Chong Xian said with a gloomy face. "Where am I black? It's clear that you want to seize and seize." The little medical fairy had a pretty face that was unwilling, struggling hard, but unable to break free from the grip. She regretted refusing them to rejoin the team as early as she knew, which caused the current awkward situation. "Let's go down together, the treasure is 5-5. Chong Xian let go of her and turned to look at Xiao Yan, who was eager to try. "I agree," Xiao Yan chuckled. "I refuse." The little doctor was full of displeasure. "Do you have the right to refuse? Believe it or not, I will kill and throw the body immediately." Chong Xian glanced at her and measured the height of the rock wall from the stone platform. The length of the rope was just right. "Junior brother, thank you for going down with her. It's not hard." Xiao Yan had already wrapped the rope around his body while speaking, showing a very positive attitude. "Two robbers," whispered the little doctor beside him, pursing his lips at this moment. Chong Xian spoke again, and his words left the little doctor stunned. Zhaoshuyuan.com, you go over and hold my junior brother, you two go down together. I don't feel at ease whether you walk in front of or behind him. Why should I hold him? The little doctor was full of displeasure as he gritted his teeth and looked at the two senior brothers. You are not only robbers, but also hooligans. Xiao Yan pinched his nose but didn't speak. Chong Xian spoke in a deep voice, if you don't want to, I'll throw you off the cliff. Xiao Yixian's beautiful eyes are firm, her pretty face is full of indomitability, and she is not afraid of such threats. Chong Xian raised his eyebrows, and Jia smiled with a gloomy expression. We two big men, you weak woman, don't force us to do anything bad, he said. Xiao Yan immediately understood and showed a very bad expression, with a wicked smile. The little doctor's delicate body trembled, took a step back, and blurted out, 2 men, 1 woman, how could this be? Hee, you're still too naive. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan smiled at each other. The little girl didn't know there were 3 horses like this in the world. Chong Xian's palm was placed on her delicate shoulder, and the little doctor fairy panicked. These two were indeed hooligans. It's shameless. The little doctor bit his silver teeth and felt very aggrieved. Chong Xian smiled with satisfaction and reminded both of them to pay attention to safety. Xiao Yan and the little doctor fairy tied together, like tying Zongzi tightly. The little doctor fairy blushed and glared at Chong Xian. Chong Xian pretended not to have seen it and sat quietly waiting. Xiao Yan greeted and slowly climbed down the rope with Xiao Yixian, with extra caution in their movements. Purple cloud wings, explosive steps, colorful poison scriptures, demon fire residual pictures. Chong Xian muttered to himself, sitting on the cliff, quietly waiting for the good news below. Chapter 6. Black Shirt Young Man, 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Time flies, 2 hours have passed. The rope tied to the rock wall moved and then straightened. Chong Xian's eyes flickered and he walked to the edge of the rock wall, looking down. He saw Xiao Yan with a small medical fairy tied behind him, climbing upwards. Not long after, he returned to the rock wall. Is there any gain? Chong Xian watched as Xiao Yan untied the rope, while Xiao Yixian stood on the side, his originally disheartened pretty face also showing a hint of joy. Yes, there is. Xiao Yan chuckled, the record is remarkable. In addition to fighting skills and techniques, there are also piles of gold coins piled up like mountains, added Xiao Yixian. I thought Xiao Yan, this shameless person, would eat and wipe up the treasure after receiving it, and poke her in the back, but he actually kept his word very well, and the treasure below was divided into 50 and 50. Her pretty face carried an indescribable joy, and the distance between her and Xiao Yan also subsided a lot. Xiao Yixian is not foolish, knowing that the two are not bad people. We should go back now. Chong Xian didn't deliberately ask about the gains he already knew. The three of them smiled at each other and returned to the Medicine Valley where the mercenaries were stationed. As they were about to part ways, the little medical fairy carried her hands behind her, cute as a white butterfly, and glanced at Xiao Yan again. Xiao Yan smiled heartily, with a confident and determined expression, blinking at him. The little doctor's delicate body trembled, and his fair face blushed as he ran away. "Ha, junior brother, you can do it. You have feelings so quickly," Chong Xian joked. "Xiao Yixian, she is a kind and good girl," Xiao Yan said with clear eyes and a smile. In the following time, Chong Xian and Xiao Yan have been collecting spiritual medicines within the scope of the Medicine Valley. With the help of the unique alchemist, Yao Lao, every herb is a help for Xiao Yan to become stronger. Xiao Yixian is very busy with picking herbs. Occasionally, he would come over to talk to his two brothers, and sometimes he would also bring a few spiritual herbs. The relationship between the three of them has heated up a lot. This situation made Xiao Yan and his wife both happy and headache-stricken, as they found that the mercenaries with large arms, round waist, and muscular bodies around them were looking at them with increasingly bad eyes. Once, even a 3-star fighter stepped forward and casually made an excuse to compete with Xiao Yan. Chong Xian stood up and said, "I'll just stand here and don't move. You can use your martial arts and fighting skills casually, and I won't fight back. I'm not stupid." The mercenary's eyes widened, knowing that the physical strength of the person in front of him was abnormal, and he gave up in frustration. "Don't bother with them, just focus on picking herbs and practicing." The old medicine man's deep voice rang out. "Yes, teacher." The two teenagers shouted in their hearts at the same time. The medicine garden is a blessed place, where cultivation is twice the result with half the effort. Xiao Yan is a cultivation maniac, who not only collects herbs but also cultivates wholeheartedly. Later, he even threw the task of picking herbs to Chong Xian and devoted himself wholeheartedly to cultivating his fighting spirit. Chong Xian smiled and shook his head, taking the initiative to become a tool man. "You don't have to envy me. If I promise to teach you martial arts, I won't treat anyone unfairly." When Chong Xian turned around to collect herbs, the voice of the medicine elder rang out again. "Thank you very much, teacher," Chong Xian said with a happy expression on his face. "You have a special physique and do not need to deliberately strengthen the cultivation of Dukigong. Instead, you need to constantly refine your body to achieve the so-called sanctification of the body state. I will gradually teach you the specific cultivation methods in the future. The body becomes holy." Chong Xian was taken aback and then turned to look forward to it. Xiao Yan practiced, Chong Xian collected herbs, and 3 days passed in a blink of an eye. The collection of herbs from the little Doctor Immortal is almost done, and everyone plans to set off on their return journey early tomorrow morning. On the way back, Xiao Yan and Chong Xian walked next to the little Doctor Immortal, one on the left and one on the right, becoming enviable flower protectors. Surprisingly chatting and laughing with their little fairy, I really wish I could drag them to the small forest and ravage them. Xiao Yixian felt the hostility of the mercenaries beside him, but smiled silently. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan sighed to themselves. What a disaster for beauty. The way back for everyone was smooth, with only a few waves of first-order monster attacks. They were quickly killed and returned to Qingshan town. The little medical fairy overpaid the reward for this incident, and the mercenaries disbanded on their own. After taking a glance at the little fairy they had been longing for, they gradually walked away. Unfortunately, the accessories for the Blood Lotus pill have not been fully collected yet, sighed Xiao Yan. Don't worry, we have plenty of time, Chong Xian comforted with a smile. At this moment, Xiao Yixian jumped over and blinked his agile eyes. What medicinal herbs do you lack? Maybe I can help, he said. Chapter 7. Black Shirt Young Man, 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Over the Warcraft Mountains, wild beasts roar. The whistling sound of the breaking wind began, and a huge blue bird swept across the sky, flying towards the depths of the mountains. On the back of the blue bird, Xiao Yan and Chong Xian's eyes shone with novelty. Soaring high in the sky, I feel my soul flying freely, and every cell feels incredibly comfortable. The two teenagers couldn't help but open their hands and make a gesture of embracing heaven and earth. You sit still, don't move around, it's making me very uncomfortable. Little Dr. Xian sat at the front with a frown on her face and said angrily. Sitting at the back, Xiao Yan chuckled and said, I'm sorry, it's my first time trying. I'm too excited. No wonder the recognized Do Wang in the mainland is the true powerhouse, with his fighting spirit turning into wings and soaring freely in the sky and earth, which is truly addictive. Chong Xian added. Two fools are obsessed with cultivation all day long. The little doctor turned his mouth aside and roasted in a very cute way. Then she lightly patted the bluebird's back and said, Xiaolan, let's land. Xiaolan let out a loud echo and tilted down. Amidst the howling wind, Chong Xian squinted his eyes and saw a canyon secret realm growing bigger and bigger. Inside, there were lush vegetation and vitality, and it turned out to be a treasure land even more beautiful than the Medicine Valley. Xiaolan landed and everyone crashed into the embrace of the secret realm. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan were both shocked by the beautiful scenery before them when they landed. Looking around, this secret realm is like a paradise, scattered with various precious herbs, and lively small animals walking around, poking their heads to look at three outsiders. There is a high slope here, where an old tree is rooted and growing, a thick and old peach tree, with pink petals blooming and scorching its brilliance. When the wind rises, peach blossoms dance and fall across the entire secret realm canyon, like a pink spring rain. The fragrant grass is delicious, the fallen petals are colorful, isolated from the world. Being here, the three of them felt a bit of peace in their hearts, freely breathing in the clear and comfortable fragrance emanating from the air. Xiao Yixian looked at the two young boys with a surprised expression. She covered her mouth and smiled with a proud expression. This is the secret garden I accidentally discovered. If you lack medicinal herbs, feel free to ask for them. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan smiled at each other. What a great place. Treasures are everywhere, opportunities are rare. I really wish I could have scraped off all the grass for him. The little Dr. Fairy bounced and led the two of them forward, and the two teenagers occasionally sighed around. On the high slope, next to an old tree, there is a simple wooden house. Xiao Yixian walked up to the door and chuckled lightly. Go ahead and do your own work. If you can't climb up, just shout Xiaolan. Thank you, little Dr. Immortal. The two young boys laughed heartily and couldn't wait. Xiao Yixian returned to the wooden house to rest, while also studying the 7-colored poison classic in his hand. The two boys headed straight for the medicinal herbs and began to collect wool without any courtesy. By evening, the valley was quiet. Two young boys returned from picking herbs and sat under the peach tree, watching birds return to the forest day and night. If we could live a simple life, it would be a great pleasure, Chong Xian chuckled, feeling relieved. Yeah. Xiao Yan chuckled lightly and reached out to catch a falling pink petal. After sniffing it lightly on his mouth, he gently crushed it. In the depths of his eyes, a stubborn expression flashed. He yearns for rural life, but is unwilling to live a mediocre life. The teacher said that in the morning and evening, the fighting spirit of heaven and earth is the purest, and I have gone to practice. Xiao Yan stood up and sat up under the roots of the old peach tree, his eyes lowered, and he practiced his techniques. Quickly, ripples of fighting spirit appeared on him, and the fighting spirit of heaven and earth slowly poured back into his body like a tide. His face was increasingly radiant. Chong Xian looked at Xiao Yan, who had already settled down, and smiled helplessly. Indeed, he is Emperor Yan, with 3 deep-rooted characteristics. First, either in cultivation or on the path of cultivation. Secondly, either meeting a beauty or on the road to meeting a beauty. Thirdly, either dying or on the way to death. His time is running out, and the 3-year agreement is an insurmountable hurdle in his heart. His inherent pride does not allow him to give up. Yao Lao's deep voice rang out, and in the next moment, a cloud of green smoke flew out of the black ring, gradually condensing into an illusory figure. The teacher is right, but with such tension, I'm afraid my junior brother might have a problem with his character, Chong Xian said with concern. I will keep an eye on his situation at all times, Yao Lao said solemnly as he touched his beard. He practices diligently, but it's your senior brother who has been slacking off all along, Yao Lao sneered. But I can't practice, and I don't have the appropriate martial arts and combat skills. Chong Xian paused halfway and turned to look at Yao Lao with surprise and anticipation. Yao Lao chuckled and said, "Can't you bear it anymore? We'll talk about the cultivation in a few days." Chong Xian's excitement was in vain, and he was completely dejected. "Teasing you, come with me and I'll teach you a way to cultivate immediately." Yao Lao smiled proudly and walked ahead. "Sleeping trough, teacher, you're going too far." Chong Xian's mood of falling to the bottom was suddenly brought to a climax. Emotions fluctuated and my heart was filled with a sudden surge of excitement. Who can bear this kind of emotional provocation? Within the secret territory, there is a fragrant grassland. The 2 figures, one old and one young, sat opposite each other. Chong Xian was straight and focused, with a hint of nervousness. After all, it was his first time learning martial arts and fighting skills. Yao Lao's figure floated in mid-air, and his voice slowed down. "You should have some understanding of your own situation. Your body is different from an ordinary person, so I will create a path for you to become a saint in your physical body. Becoming a saint through physical body does not rely on fighting skills. Just learning fighting skills can defeat the enemy. The stronger your body becomes, the stronger your strength becomes. You need to constantly refine your body, appreciate the power of heaven and earth, and ultimately transcend and step into the Holy Spirit." "I understand," Chong Xian nodded. Yao Lao nodded in satisfaction and continued to give advice and guidance in the valley. The melodious chirping of birds signifies the beginning of a new day. 8. Extreme collapse. Boom. Xiao Yan jumped up high, a layer of pale yellow fighting energy gathered on his fist, and fell like a heavy hammer, smashing it onto Chong Xian's face. Chongshuan's arm crossed and blocked in front of him. After a violent collision, he was shaken out for a long time, leaving a long trail under his feet. "Come again." Xiao Yan snapped, his fighting spirit high. Approaching Chong Xian like a ghost, he bent his elbow and even let out a whimpering wind. Chong Xian clenched his fist and said, "The 8 extremities collapse." Ah! Fist and elbow collided, and Xiao Yan was suddenly shaken back, his face extremely surprised. Chong Xuanzhen really brought out the 8 extremes collapse. Although extremely obscure, and with very limited power, Xiao Yan was extremely shocked in his heart. "Senior brother, why can you use fighting skills without cultivating fighting spirit?" Xiao Yan couldn't believe it. "He hasn't practiced, but you've been diligently practicing and never left behind." Yao Lao's illusory figure appeared and answered the question. "Don't forget what I said, your souls are connected and your spirit is connected. It's not surprising that the fighting spirit you cultivate appears on your senior brother. His fighting spirit foundation is also a 3-star fighter. Xiao Yan exploded, he can still play like this. Isn't it true that my senior brother's cultivation of fighting spirit can also feed back to me, and our cultivation effect doubles at the same time? Then I can become the Do King in 1 year and the Do Zun in 3 years. Xiao Yan was thrilled. Pop. Yao Lao slapped him on the head. Why did the old man hit me? Xiao Yan was displeased. Pop. Yao Lao turned around and made a big fuss. I'm just thinking about pie falling from the sky. Don't dream anymore. Your senior brother has a special physique and is unable to cultivate martial arts. Without martial arts, how can he catalyze fighting spirit? The way of heaven is fair. If you are given talent, you will naturally be restricted. This is an invisible shackle on all things. Unless sanctified, one cannot escape. Yao Lao spoke in a leisurely voice. I can't let my senior brother get all the cheapness. Xiao Yan let out a mournful cry, and he immediately didn't want to practice anymore. Practicing hard and spreading the fighting spirit to others, why not cultivate a little bit? You stupid kid, Chongxian, and you have the same intention. You can even say it's one thing in 2 sides, can't you put it all together? Xiao Yan's eyes lit up and he jumped up from the ground. Senior brother, let's continue practicing. I'll help you polish the 8 extremes collapse, well. Xiao Yan was clearly moved by the words. Thank you very much, junior brother. Chong Xianbai felt very guilty for soliciting Xiao Yan's fighting spirit. With short hands and soft mouths, I become more focused and hardworking during practice. Suck in your palm. Blowing fire palm. Come again. The 2 figures intertwined and clashed back and forth. Chong Xian's fighting spirit and foundation are on par with Xiao Yan, but his fighting skills are full of loopholes and he is crushed to death in his moves. However, Chongshuan's physical strength was extremely abnormal, and Xiao Yan's powerful 8 extremes collapse contained hidden energy, hitting Chongxian like a tickle. Chongxian always surpassed Xiao Yan, and under the heavy pressure, Xiao Yan's fighting skills became more flexible and varied, relying on his suction palm and blowing fire palm to constantly deal with Chongxian. Between twists and turns, I managed to regain a slight advantage. Yao Lao nodded beside him. This was the best state of cultivation, and the fighting ability of the 2 young men grew rapidly in actual combat. Yao Lao, a powerful alchemist and also a top teacher in the Duki continent, patiently carved the cultivation of the 2 young men and cultivated their personalities and souls. It seemed like something had been felt, but Yao Lao chuckled and turned into a burst of green smoke flying into the black ring. The 2 teenagers were playing hard to part with, completely focused. At this moment, an angry moan echoed through the entire canyon. Do you 2 bastards want to demolish my secret garden? Yay! After Xiao Yixian's voice rang out, a tall figure of Xiao Lan flew over and landed on the heads of the 2. The huge claws grabbed their calves and lifted them upside down. Then, flying high into the air again, tossing back and forth. Hey, I'm dying. I'm dying. The 2 teenagers caught off guard and Xiao Yan shouted loudly. Female Xia, spare your life. Chong Xian couldn't help but cry and laugh along. Xiao Yixian put his hands on his hips, hummed and smiled, and only then did Xiao Lan let them down. The 2 teenagers were dizzy, and Xiao Yan complained in a low voice. Sooner or later, we'll clean and stew this basket bird. Not far away, Xiaolan let out an unhappy cry and pecked behind Xiao Yan's buttocks with her sharp mouth. Zhaozhuyuan.com, ah, you silly bird. Xiao Yan pointed at it and cursed angrily. Xiaolan didn't get used to him either, so she chased after him and continued pecking at his buttocks. Xiao Yan quickly dodged and ran back and forth, looking quite embarrassed. Ha! Chong Xian withdrew from the land of right and wrong and walked to the side of Xiao Yixian. Look at what you've done. The little doctor exclaimed angrily. Chong Xian turned around and saw that the grass and trees in the place where he had been practicing with Xiao Yan were broken and in a mess, which looked really unsightly. I'm really sorry. Chong Xian gave an awkward smile. If you continue to cause trouble, I'll let Xiaolan peck your buttocks apart and throw them out, said Xiao Yixian with a proud smile as he pinched the corner of his white dress. I dare not, I dare not. Chong Xian shook his head repeatedly. This girl is really difficult to provoke. In my impression, she is cute, romantic, and harmless to humans and animals. Potatoes are bothering me. At this moment, the sunshine filled the valley and it was full of vitality. The water droplets on the plants had evaporated, and a gentle light fell on the beautiful and lovely girl's face beside her. She looked at Xiao Yan being played with by Xiao Lan and couldn't help but laugh. Bright eyes and white teeth, like heaven and earth. Chong Xian tilted his face slightly and saw a more beautiful scenery than the valley. The two stood together, watching Xiao Yan being repeatedly begged for mercy by Xiao Lan, and Xiao Yixian's pretty face was even more proud. Fool, look at you insulting Xiaolan. Xiao Yixian's hands were in an enlarged voice shape, and he let out a coquettish and gentle voice, shouting proudly at Xiao Yan. Chong Xian's mind was buzzing, and he felt a trance like a dream. The person in the book, the scenery in the painting, actually walked into reality. I'm really worried, this is just a very, very long dream. Chapter 8. Black Shirt Young Man, 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Life is like a dream, a bottle of it still sprinkles Jiang Yu. Chong Xian can no longer remember which ancestor wrote a poem. If it were really a dream, I would be willing to sleep for a long time without waking up, Chong Xian sighed to himself. In the distance, Xiao Yan was still being crazily chased by Xiao Lan, with a disheveled face. You silly bird, when I refine purple cloud wings, see how you catch up with me. Xiao Yan hugged his head and tossed around, cursing in his mouth. As a result, Xiaolan let out a contemptuous cry and mercilessly bullied him. For half a day, the valley echoed with Xiao Yan's angry voice. He was cleaned up very badly, but he was very tough and unwilling to accept the soft. The little doctor covered his mouth and chuckled lightly, if you die, you'll have to suffer. The gentle breeze is not dry, rolling up a peach-colored falling petals, drifting throughout the entire valley. Flowers and rain fall all over the sky, some on the fragrant grasslands, some on the slopes, some in the soil, and some with the blessing of the wind, continuing to wander towards the sky. Falling flowers and flowing water, time flows slowly, 10 days have passed. Under the old peach tree, petals lay a thin layer of pink carpet, and the three of them sat together, chatting and laughing. Junior brother, how have you been practicing lately? Chong Xian asked. I felt a bottleneck and couldn't touch the 5-star barrier. Xiao Yan let out a light sigh and tapped his fingers rhythmically on the table. Haste makes waste, and cultivation emphasizes gradual progress. Like me, I never rush. Chong Xian chuckled. Senior brother, of course you're not in a hurry. As long as I cultivate Duki, your body will also generate Duki. You don't need to practice in a boring way, Xiao Yan said helplessly to Chong Xian. Haha. Chong Xian shamelessly smiled. Xiao Yan was full of helplessness, and Chong Xian's open-hanging physique was truly enviable. However, he didn't complain too much. During these 10 days, Chong Xian helped him collect a large amount of medicinal herbs, which saved him enough time to fully devote himself to cultivation. Moreover, Chong Xian, as a professional sandbag, has comparable strength to him, and the training effect is excellent. Xiao Yan's combat effectiveness has improved by leaps and bounds. The teacher is right. The heavenly way is the fairest, giving you a freedom, and naturally giving you a shackle. There is never a benefit in vain. After spending some time together, the relationship between the two teenagers has greatly improved. Xiao Yixian was quiet and silent, with her fair jade hands holding her chin, watching the two of them dance and discuss cultivation issues. Senior brother, how should you cultivate your body becoming a saint? Xiao Yan was very curious. The temporary conditions are not enough. After I start practicing, let's have a good practical experience, Chong Xian said with a smile. When the time comes, we. Oh, you two stinky men are so boring. The little doctor was unhappy and reached out his jade hand to poke a jar of aged wine placed on the stone table. We agreed to drink together, but you two left me on the side. Huh, we were wrong, just accompany one. Senior brother, let's go. Xiao Yan poured a cup and filled it for Chongxian as well. The jade liquid reverberates in the porcelain bowl, with a refreshing and tempting fragrance that makes one crave. Chongxian picked up the bowl, and the two clinked their glasses before drinking it all in one gulp. The fine wine entered the throat and felt warm and comfortable in the lower abdomen. Xiao Yan patted the table and gave the little doctor a thumbs up, good wine. I didn't expect the little Dr. Immortal to be beautiful and kind-hearted, and also clever and skilled. Which man married you? How fortunate. That's right, Xiuwai Huizhong. Chong Xian laughed heartily and said against his heart. The little Dr. Fairy's pretty face turned red, and her joy was beyond words. She also poured half a bowl, lifted her fair and jade-like neck, and drank it, wiping her mouth elegantly. Just after drinking half a bowl, she had a rosy glow on her cheeks. She opened her mouth and said, "Your senior brothers, what are your plans for the future?" The two boys looked at each other and smiled. We're going to stay in the Warcraft Mountains to experience, and we're going to the Tagore Desert in the future. That's great. The little doctor held a porcelain bowl in both hands and chuckled, then poured half a bowl of wine. Looking down, I saw my beautiful face reflected in the bowl. I also plan to travel to the mainland and see the outside world, I said. I heard that the Cloud Empire near the Gamma Empire has many strange landscapes. She spoke excitedly with a sea of stars in her eyes. If you want to go, go ahead. Xiao Yan laughed heartily. In the future, if there is an opportunity, we can form a team, said Chong Xian. Okay. The little Dr. Fairy smiled brightly. Under the old peach tree, the three of them were chatting happily. In my heart, there are mountains and seas in the distance. While chatting and laughing, Xiao Yan's body suddenly shook. He was stunned for a moment, then stood up excitedly, and without saying a word, took a few steps back and sat down. The little doctor was very surprised. Junior brother, we need to break through the 5-star dough. Chong Xian's face lit up with joy. Under the constant practice of reversing black and white, Xiao Yan did not feel the opportunity to break through. Unexpectedly, by chance, he relaxed and had a chance to drink and chat. There are many things in the world that truly make people laugh and cry. Chapter 9. Black Shirt Young Man, 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The faint fighting energy between heaven and earth continuously converged into Xiao Yan's body, controlled by him to form a cycle of heaven and earth within his body. Then, the energy sank into the Dantian and slowly merged into the Doji cyclone. Xiao Yan's body was covered with a layer of white light, warm and powerful. The Doji cyclone inside him was like a hungry beast, refusing to resist the influx of white Duki into his body and devouring it completely. During the process of swallowing Duki, the Doji cyclone continues to expand, containing more and more Duki. 1 hour later, the cyclone doubled in size, resembling a brilliant small nebula with twinkling starlight. And Xiao Yan also opened his eyes, with a flash of energy in his eyes. His momentum only grew stronger, and he successfully advanced to the 5-star dough. At the same time, Chongshuan's fighting spirit in his body doubled, and his fists became more powerful. Very good. Even Yao Lao, who had been silent all along, was filled with emotions in the hearts of the two young men at this moment. Finally, after suffering all the hardships, it's sweet. Xiao Yan couldn't help but be overjoyed and took the initiative to sit on the stone table, picking up the porcelain bowl. Chong Xian, the little doctor, laughed and spoke in unison, "Congratulations. The little doctor immortal is not strong enough to drink, so he returned to the cabin early to rest." The two teenagers had a great time drinking until late at night, when the cold moon hung high on the branches of the old peach tree. The night breeze of the valley blew by, bringing up patches of fallen leaves, and the grass and trees whispered, especially peaceful. Two teenagers were lying on the stone table, spilling fine wine all over the table. The wine jar rolled to their feet, drunk and asleep. "Senior brother, wake up. The little doctor immortal is missing." Xiao Yan's hurried voice awakened Chong Xian, and by this time the sun had risen 3 times, the sun was shining brightly. Chong Xian shook his head, still feeling a bit confused. "Don't worry, little Dr. Immortal must have gone out to collect herbs. There may not be many herbs in the valley. She always comes back to cook for us when we go out to pick herbs, and she's never late a day," Xiao Yan said seriously. "I'm very worried that she encountered someone with a wolf's head while picking herbs." Chong Xian's expression also became solemn. "Let's go find her together." Warcraft Mountain Range, a forested area. The blue bird was covered in scars and its eyes were filled with anger, constantly chirping around. On top of its body, it is tightly wrapped and held by a pitch-black python. The body of the python is as thick and thin as a wooden barrel, with black mucus on top, constantly corroding the body of the bluebird. The blue bird let out a painful cry, opened its claws and fiercely thrust into the body of the python. Its sharp mouth bit the python 7 inches and it fell into a stalemate. "Xiaolan." Behind the blue bird, the little Dr. Fairy cried out in great pain, looking angrily at the fierce mercenaries gathered outside. They are wearing uniform and the one-eyed wolf badge, and they are members of the wolf-headed mercenary corps. Muley gave a gloomy smile on the periphery and said, "Little doctor, it's been really hard for me to find it these days. Follow me obediently, otherwise this blue-haired beast will die in the mouth of the black python today." As soon as he finished speaking, the black python shrank its body and its black scales twisted. The terrifying force shattered Xiaolan's bones, causing her to scream in agony. Xiaolan remained unyielding and struggled to tear a bloody opening under the black python's belly with her sharp claws. The second-level monster black python has a hard body and is highly poisonous. Even a 5-star fighter wouldn't dare to provoke it. This type of warcraft is difficult to raise by humans, and it is unknown what methods Muley used to domesticate an adult black python. This type of warcraft is particularly skilled at sneak attacks, and Xiaolan was taken advantage of by the black python to protect the little Dr. Immortal. After being bitten, she fell into a desperate situation. So it was, Xiaolan's eyes didn't give in at all. "Come here." Muley sneered and hooked his fingers at the little medical fairy. The wolf-headed mercenary laughed and said, "Boss, if you eat meat, you need to leave a mouthful of soup for your brothers." The little girl's eyebrows are clear and her eyes are beautiful, she must be very moist. They scrutinized the little medical fairy recklessly, and the latter's face turned pale. He clenched his fists tightly, his joints turning white. "If I had known not to leave the valley too far, now that the Xiao Yan brothers are not by her side, she has no chance of escaping again. Let me fall into the hands of these people, it's better for me to make a decision on my own." Little Dr. Xian felt sad in his heart. Muley lost patience in his eyes and came to the back of the little medical fairy with a ghostly figure. He pinched her fragrant shoulder and said, "It's so soft." Xiao Yixian turned around and sprinkled a ball of blue powder. Muley sneered, "With the same trick, I thought I would be fooled." He slapped the little Dr. Fairy on the shoulder, and a strong force shook her away, causing her to fall heavily to the ground unconscious. Xiaolan sensed that Xiao Yixian had an accident and suddenly became furious, emitting sharp screams and crazily tearing at the black python, completely ignoring the excruciating pain of bone fragmentation. Xiaolan bit the black python 7 inches away, and its scales, which could not be broken with a sword, were torn apart by its sharp claws. Xiaolan's claws were also flesh and blood blurred. The black python is also struggling to the death, fiercely counterattacking. The blue-haired beast is quite horizontal. Muley snorted and walked up to the little medical fairy. Picking up the little medical fairy, Muley smiled contentedly, like a successful hunter. In vain, his smiling face stiffened, and he noticed that the arm holding the little medical fairy was visibly turning black, accompanied by intense pain. The real poison powder actually spilled on the little medical fairy herself, and she was not afraid of poison. You still foolishly fell for it. Little Dr. Xian forced his eyes open, with no fear on his face. Muley was furious and said, "Little slut." Pop. With a slap, the little medical fairy was knocked out. Roar. At this moment, Xiaolan, in a state of madness, completely tore up the black python and let out a wild roar, dragging her broken body towards this side. Muley's eyes were cold, and he drew a sharp knife from the side, chopping out a bright light of fighting spirit that flashed across Xiaolan's neck. In an instant, Xiaolan's neck was engulfed in blood, and she collapsed to the ground, her eyes fixed on the unknown little medical immortal. Gradually, his eyes lost their radiance. Muley grabbed the knife with his back hand and quickly rushed to the front of the little medical fairy, raising his sharp knife high and saying, "It's shameless to give face, death. When the sharp knife falls, it will inevitably bring a burst of blood." Chong. However, a black stone bounced from a distance, flying the sharp knife in Muley's hand and creating a string of sparks. A low voice descended from the sky, "Muley, you must die today." Muley raised his head and noticed a purple wing hovering in the sky, just in time to meet the other person's gaze. The inexplicable deterrent force made his heart tremble. Do Wang. Muley's eyes widened and he was almost scared to death. Just as he was stunned for a moment, Xiao Yan was already close to his eyes, his fists constantly expanding. The 8 extremes collapse. With a loud shout, the fighting spirit surged and continuously gathered in his fist, landing on Muley's head. Muley hastily responded, but was also greatly frightened by Xiao Yan's purple cloud wing. The defense barrier he made was like paper paste, and one side was completely torn apart by Xiao Yan. The fist enlarged and finally landed heavily on Muley's chest. Bang! Puff! Muley spat out a mouthful of blood and was shaken out, his face turning pale. Protect the young master. Everything just happened in an instant, and the wolf-head mercenary corps finally realized and surrounded Xiao Yan one after another. Xiao Yan sneered and nervously squatted down to check on the situation of the little doctor fairy. Kill him. The mercenaries were extremely ruthless, their swords shining with cold light, and they rushed forward. At least 20 people, all at the level of a 3-star fighter. Bang! At this moment, Chong Xian appeared behind Xiao Yan, holding a large tree with a waist thickness in his hand. Drink softly and charged towards the mercenaries. Kill him for me. The mercenary led by him was particularly arrogant, laughing loudly. Chong. He swung his knife and first struck Chongshuan's neck, his face beaming with joy. But then, his sharp knife shattered directly. Chong Xian used the big tree as a stick and swung it towards the leader. The leader looked up and his eyes suddenly turned black. After a loud bang, the big tree was smashed and the leader's head was smashed. Chong Xian charged forward and launched a 8 extremes collapse move, flying a mercenary. For a moment, all mercenaries became particularly wary. Muley stood up, spitting blood from his mouth and feeling much lethargic. Senior brother, they all deserve to die. Xiao Yan found a weak breath after examining the young Dr. Fairy, and immediately became furious. Don't worry, they'll leave it to me, Chongxian said. Before he could finish speaking, he unleashed a new blow, the 8 extremes collapse. Muley was the first to bear the brunt and collided with Chongxian. He didn't know that comparing physical strength with Chongxian was something that a fool could do. Bang! The violent collision froze for a second, and Muley's only remaining arm exploded in place, turning into a shower of blood. And Chongxian's palm took advantage of the situation to pinch Muley's throat. Muley screamed in horror, "You can't kill me. My father, Moose Snake, is a dosher and he won't let you go. Release the young master." Someone immediately came first to kill. Chongxian was about to punch when he saw Xiao Yan flashing in front of him, blocking him. Chongxian reached out and disabled Muley's legs, turning to fight shoulder to shoulder with Xiao Yan. The battle was particularly intense, and Xiao Yan constantly replenished the qi revitalization pill in his mouth. He searched for the book Garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com and repeatedly launched the powerful 8 Extremes collapse, causing many mercenaries to die under the dark power. Chongxian rampaged and guarded behind Xiao Yan, using brute force to kill people alive, while others were knocked out far away. After a battle, the two young men showed no mercy. More than 20 mercenaries, but only a few left trembling and fled, while the others were all executed. Muley's face was extremely ugly and he was still screaming in agony. "Young Master Muley, you almost killed the little doctor immortal just now." Xiao Yan remained expressionless, wiped away the blood from his hand, and landed on Muley's broken legs. "Ah!" Muley's painful face twitched. "You even killed Xiaolan." Chongshuan's eyes were cold as he landed on the other leg of Muley. Muley gasped in pain, convulsing all over and unable to shout. "Huh, you fake fighting king, I hate you. My dad will replace me." Bang! Halfway through Muley's words, a heavy punch hit his chest. He stiffly lowered his head, full of unwillingness, and slowly fell to the ground to die. Xiao Yan withdrew his fist and picked up the unconscious little medical fairy, walking to the side of Xiao Lan's body. Xiao Lan's body was broken, her claws were broken, revealing a forest of white bones. Her blue wings were covered in blood stains, and she lowered her head, staring at Xiao Yixian with closed eyes. "Xiao Yixian is doing well, please rest in peace." Xiao Yan hugged Xiao Yixian and whispered in a low voice, gently leaning her against a small piece of blue feather that was not stained with blood on Xiaolan. Reaching out his hand, he imitated the way Xiao Yixian looked before and gently patted Xiaolan. Chongxian stood aside, surprised to see Xiaolan's widened eyes slowly relax, and the last trace of attachment in her eyes dissipated. It closed its eyes. Chapter 10. Black Shirt Young Man, Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Under the old tree, there is a tall tomb, where Xiaolan sleeps forever. The breeze is not dry, pink peach blossoms are falling, covered with a thin veil. The little medical fairy clasped her hands together and silently prayed under the old tree. "My friend, my soul is forever safe." 2 teenagers stood behind them, silent. Every time she comes here, Xiaolan likes to stop under the old peach tree. Xiao Yixian looked at the pink ocean above her head and forced a smile. Chongxian poked Xiao Yan, who pondered for a moment and spoke up, "Xiaolan definitely doesn't want you to be sad. Cheer up." "Well, I know." Her fair and pretty face showed determination, like a small white flower after the rain, with a hint of tenacity in her delicate state. Xiao Yixian's body was still very weak, and he was heavily injured by Muli. After completing the prayer, his whole state was very poor, and his delicate body was shaking and almost falling. Xiao Yan quickly supported him from behind and spoke softly, "You go back and rest. Xiaolan has me and senior brother with you." Mm. The little doctor nodded and was about to return to the wooden house to rest. At this moment, a sudden mutation occurred. A purple aura appeared on her fair forehead, turning into a purple-black color, and the black aura spread out from her delicate body. She had a nervous expression all over her face. Just as she was about to say something to Xiao Yan, she swayed and fell into a coma. Fortunately, she was held in Xiao Yan's arms. Be careful. Yao Lao Lao's voice rang out, and a white soul power barrier immediately appeared on Xiao Yan's body surface, blocking all the black energy. The black gas contacts the soul power barrier and emits a corrosive sound, indicating that this thing has strong toxicity. Xiao Yan held the fainting little medical fairy in his arms, his face flustered. "Teacher, what's wrong with her?" After pondering for a moment, Yao Lao finally let out a soft sigh and said, "What a poor little girl." Inside the wooden house, the little Dr. Fairy was breathing more evenly on the bed, and her pale face returned to a rosy color. She fell asleep peacefully. There is no cure for the poisonous body of the disaster, Yao Lao's illusory figure floated and said solemnly, "Every generation of the owner of the poisonous body of the disaster has never escaped the fate of the poisonous body's backlash, and his body decays and tragically dies. Is there really no way?" Xiao Yan looked at the sleeping little medical fairy with a look of unbearable expression on his face. "No," Yao Lao shook his head and sighed lightly. Chong Xian stood outside the wooden house without speaking throughout. His eyes drooped, as if he was pondering something. The little Doctor Immortal was only in the early stages of the poison attack, and the purple-black poison gas was quickly suppressed, which was considered safe and sound. After waking up, she found that Xiao Yan was safe and sound, and then she breathed a long sigh of relief, with a hint of a smile on her face. Xiao Yan couldn't laugh and continued to practice with a heavy head. In the valley, life returns to tranquility once again. Until the third day, Chong Xian and Xiao Yan decided to go outside to explore the wind. Mu Snake is the commander of the Wolf Head Mercenary Corps, and Mu Li is his only son. He is bound to never die. You must be more careful. The little Dr. Fairy said with a worried expression. Don't worry, if you can't beat it, then run away. Xiao Yan pinched his nose and laughed heartily. Chong Xian also smiled, and the two of them walked up the not-too-steep mountain wall on one side, quickly disappearing into the valley. The little Dr. Fairy watched them walk away, turned back to look at the tall tomb under the old peach tree, and sighed as the sound echoed in the valley. Warcraft Mountain Range, somewhere in the forest. Roar. The roaring sound echoed as a rhinoceros-like monster was surrounded by 5 mercenaries. Rhinoceros, a first-order warcraft with infinite power, adept at collision. The adult rhinoceros beast has reached the level of an 8-star fighter in strength. The mercenaries orderly shrank and surrounded, and at a glance, they knew they were experienced veterans, constantly consuming the physical strength of the rhinoceros beast. All of this was seen by Chong Xian and Xiao Yan, who were hiding in the dark. They are not members of the wolf-headed mercenary corps either. The wolf-headed people seem to have evaporated from the mortal world. Xiao Yan looked at the badge on the mercenary's chest and sighed in disappointment. We can politely ask these people about the whereabouts of their wolf heads, Chong Xian said. Half an hour later. Bang! Ivan, who was left alone, was punched to the ground by Chong Xian, with a bruise on his right eye. He spoke in fear, "Two adults, I remember I didn't provoke you, did I?" Chong Xian narrowed his eyes and smiled, trying to show a friendly demeanor. "I have something to ask you," he said, Ivan's head was pounding garlic, afraid of being killed by the 2 people in front of him if his reaction was slow. "Do you know what the Wolf Head Mercenary Corps is doing these days?" Xiao Yan asked. Wolf Head and his team seem to have a conflict internally. I heard that Muley was killed by someone in the Warcraft Mountains, and the wolf-headed people were shouting for revenge, but he was suppressed by the leader Moose Snake, Ivan immediately said without hesitation. Xiao Yan and Chong Xian were taken aback. Was this unreasonable? Muley is the son of Moose Snake, and he should be the one who wants to avenge Muley the most. Have all the people from the Wolf Head withdrawn from the Warcraft Mountains? Chong Xian asked. I just. Xiao Yan's eyes turned cold. Ivan was startled and immediately spoke up, I remember. The wolf-headed people have all returned to Qingshan town. Mu Shi kept his subordinates locked up and even cancelled their daily employment tasks. After he finished speaking, he looked at the faces of the two young men and saw that their brows furrowed and they didn't speak. Two adults, have you had a conflict with Wolf Head? Ivan mustered up the courage to ask, and as he spoke, he regretted for a moment, afraid that the other party would kill and silence him. Well, we killed Muley. The two boys turned around and disappeared after a few jumps. Oh, you guys killed. What? Ivan's eyes widened as he looked at the direction of the two young boys' departure, and suddenly burst into a cold sweat. Zhaoshuyuan.com. In the valley, it is still so quiet and beautiful. Chong Xian and Xiao Yan slid down the rock wall and returned here, just as a day was about to pass. Xiao Yixian, are the dishes ready? Xiao Yan exclaimed happily. Chong Xian laughed and patted his stomach. The food cooked by Xiao Yixian was indeed very delicious, and they were extremely greedy. However, what responded to Xiao Yan was tranquility. What happened? The two boys were shocked and immediately rushed into the wooden house, only to see that it was already empty inside. The objects are neatly arranged, and there is still a faint fragrance in the air. The herb by the bedside was only watered recently, and the water droplets on the stems and leaves are not dry. Glancing around, the two young men saw the letter placed on the table by the window. Chongxian understood it and slowly left the room. Xiao Yan reached out and picked up the letter, carefully reading it word by word. After a long time, let out a light sigh. In the secluded valley, under the old tree, two young men gazed into the distance. She wants to go and see the outside world before the poison spreads, Xiao Yan sighed lightly, feeling lost. She is still stubborn like you in her bones, unwilling for us to pity her. She would rather be alone, Chong Xian said in a deep voice. But where can she go? Xiao Yan's hand, holding the letter in his hand, turned white. She has injuries on her body, there is no Xiaolan around, and there are people with wolf heads who are eyeing her. She is alone and has no relatives. Brave little girl, you know the path you need to take, so be good at learning from others. Yao Lao's illusory figure appeared. Yao Lao continued to speak, we have been staying here for a while now, and we will depart tomorrow. Time is precious. The two teenagers nodded and continued to look into the distance, sending deep blessings to those who traveled far away.